Welcome to another exciting episode of the Collect and Destroy podcast. I'm your host, the Baxter of Puppets. This week, we have a very special double feature episode for you in which we will be diving into two of the greatest and most quotable American comedy films of all time. The first of these films being 1983's National Lampoon's Vacation, which takes us on an unforgettable cross-country family road trip. And the second being Vacation's 1989 sequel, an instant holiday classic, National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation. Without any further delay, let me introduce today's special guest, Ken Hoffman. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, brother. It's good to be back, man.
How you been?
I've been good. I've been crazy. You know, December, Christmas madness is upon us all. I'm feeling the pressure to get a lot of shit done right now. So, but it's good. I'd rather be busy than not, you know?
Yeah, it's been I hate to say weird year, but it's been a weird year. Which then now it's December, and I too, like with work and stuff, it's like madness, and you know that it's that home stretch to the holidays. And I think both of us can attest to like taking on a bunch of projects that we probably shouldn't, but you know, that's our way.
Well, I've always been like, it's consistent. If I'm really busy at work, for some reason that gets me fired up to be busy at home in my own personal stuff. It's never like I'm slow at work, let me take on some things. It's like this weird continuous, you know, synergy. And I think that my clients from a work perspective have realized they could still flourish in a COVID environment because, you know, people are still buying wine and spirits. So I'm really busy right now working on 2021 projects. So then, you know, I'm swamped there and I'm like, well, let's just, you know, let's launch a skull company if you can, and let's, you know, work on all these other projects. So I'm bombed right now, which is a good thing, but you know, I'm looking forward to getting some rest after New Year's Eve.
Yeah, I get so hyped up. I have a problem with saying no. So people keep approaching me with new things on top of work, and then you've got the holidays and the stress of holidays, but it's also kind of like an exciting stress. Like it's self-inflicted in a way.
Right.
We're not traveling home this year, which seems like it makes things easier. Right. But at the same time, then you're like coordinating shipping to all these different houses and doing all this stuff.
Yeah.
But it's exciting and it's rewarding when it's all done. But when you're in the middle of it, you're like, what am I doing? I'm going to go record a podcast.
You know, the reality is, dude, is that like successful people and interesting people don't get that way by sitting around and doing nothing. True. You know, you got to work hard. You got to be constantly moving. You have to add more to your plate. So as much as I like to complain about how busy and crazy I am, like you said, it's self-inflicted to a certain degree, but that's what keeps you young. That's what keeps you alive. That's what keeps you like creating. And, you know, if you're not learning, you're not living. So you have to take on new challenges in order to better yourself and better the world, you know? So, you know, although every now and then you do need to just chill.
Yeah, it's true. So speaking of new challenges and self-inflicting things upon yourself, I know you are knee deep in skulls right now. Do you want to give the latest update? I know on previous podcasts, we've kind of been following your journey with this. Right. Where are you at with it right now?
The skulls, which have now been officially named helmets, HELL mitts,
nice,
are way more dialed in. You know, the last time I was on your podcast, we were talking about this. They were still kind of in that rough prototype stage. They were getting a little bit more polished, but I've got them really dialed in now. The welding on the steel face masks are totally pro. I've, you know, figured out a lot of things to quote unquote automate it for myself. In terms of like making different molds and things like that, but it's still a beast of a project. I have launched them on my social media and I've got, you know, quite a few Christmas orders that I'm fulfilling right now. But then in January, my plan is to launch it on Etsy and make it to, you know, give it to a much bigger audience. But then the price is going to go up because, you know, during this journey, I've realized how time consuming it is to make one while I'm making multiple at the same time. You know, previously the prototype, I'd make one over a couple weeks. So I didn't really know what it took to just sit down and make one start to finish when I had 6 of them in the queue. And I realized that, there's no corner cutting. You got to spend a lot of time and a lot of detail work on the hand painting and the logo work. So the price has to reflect that. And when it goes, to an audience like Etsy, it might prevent some people from purchasing it. But at the same time, this is, a specialty, unique item that's an art piece. So, there's a certain demographic for that. And that's who I'm going to target. And if I sell, less of them at a higher margin, then that's what it's got to be, because they are a beast to make. But they're cool, man. Now that they're really dialed in, I'm not to toot my own horn, but I think they're cool and they're unique and they're selling, man. I posted them on the socials and friends and family are biting on them. But even on Instagram, I got some orders from strangers and they're just Venmoing me money. You know what I mean? Which is funny because there's nothing pro about my setup yet from an e-commerce perspective. I'm just like, here's the amount. And they're like, yeah, give me your Venmo. Here's the cash. I'm like, all right, I'll take it.
They look phenomenal. And I'm sure, like you said, with any new product, you kind of got to figure out what is that price point for the amount of work and the process. Some of them are beautiful, like the Green Bay Packers skull. And some of them are just really ugly, like the Bears or the Patriots,
the Packers, dude, the Packer fans are crazy. They've gotten that. The Packers has gotten the most likes, and actually right now is the #1 order, even more than I live in the NorCal area, even more than the Niners ones, and but then a close third is all my college buddies and friends in the Philly area. But my hometown, North Jersey and New York, where the order's at, dudes. Come on, I haven't sold one New York one yet. So I'm a little disappointed in that region, but we'll get there.
Yeah, Packers fans are rabid. I mean, they are the best team in the NFL. But I will. What I'm really curious about with this project is I want to know where we're at next year, 1 year from today, because I would venture a guess that the holiday season is going to be the most in-demand time of the year for these.
For sure.
And they would make a very good gift for any NFL fan. Just the craftsmanship of these is phenomenal. So I'm excited to see the growth of this.
That's something too you got to think about from like a retail perspective. Like most companies in the retail game make most of their 80% of their profit in December, in November and December at the end of the year for a holiday. So I'm casting them from scratch. So, I have to build up an inventory for next year so that I can sort of paint on demand and not just mold, cast, paint, assemble on demand. I got to cut that process way down. So, I'll have to follow the trends and see, maybe I stockpile certain teams. But, when it goes on Etsy, I'll probably make them on demand, when the orders come in.
Cool, man. So I know on top of the helmets that you usually do a custom holiday card for your family, you got one in the cooker for this year?
Yeah. In addition to all the other madness that's happening, I've got my Christmas card, which, is consistent with my Halloween themes and my, just passion of metal and skulls and the macabre. So it started out as a joke, 8 years ago now, maybe even longer, where I painted a Christmas card of a screaming kid sitting on Santa's lap, but Santa was a skeleton. And I sent it to my friends, and it kind of snowballed from there. And each year I made a different card, and, some were paintings, some was photography, some were sculptures, and then this year you pick up new skills, you kind of combine it. So I'm working on that too. And, I'm about halfway done with it. We'll see. There's always the pressure of getting that out before Christmas and mailing it. And, you got to make it, you got to photograph it, you got to print it, you got to mail it. It's a lot of work.
I'm sure I'll see it sometime in February.
You'll see it.
All right, well, let's keep things moving. Like I said, today's a special double feature episode. So we're going to be covering 2 different movies. Vacation and Christmas Vacation. We're going to start out with 1983's Vacation.
Yeah.
It's the first film in the franchise. It follows the Griswold family, Clark and Ellen, along with their 2 children, Rusty and Audrey, as they venture westward from the suburbs of Chicago to the Disneyland-like theme park, Wally World. Along the way, countless outrageous and entertaining situations arise as Clark becomes increasingly fixated on a beautiful woman driving a bright red Ferrari. The family are forced to deal with car problems and the death of a family member. The Griswolds finally reach Los Angeles, but when Clark worries that the trip is being derailed again, he acts impulsively to get his family into the park. So with that being said, Ken, when did you first see Vacation? And what are your earliest memories of the film?
Well, born in 75, Vacation I was too young to see Vacation in the theater. So I don't really have a very specific memory of when I saw it first. Like, this was the time. It kind of falls in that camp of a lot of those 80s movies where, like, I remember sort of knowing of the movie, like the aura of the movie before, and it was probably years later when I finally saw it. I knew of Chevy Chase before I saw Christmas Vacation. But I feel like there was some, like, as a kid, there was like a risque-ness about this movie. Like,
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it was kind of like those 80s comedies were like that. I remember another one was like Porky's. You know what I mean? Like, I was not allowed to watch Porky's as a kid. I was like, I wanted to see that movie really badly. And Vacation was that movie as well. So I don't have a specific memory of saying this is when I saw it, but then when you saw it, I do remember like certain things about it later on. What about you?
Yeah, I don't remember. I mean, I'm even younger than you. So yeah. No seeing it in a theater or anything like that, but it's just kind of always part of my life, like growing up. Like, it's weird because, like you said, it was a risque film. I remember it being risque, but I also remember it being like a family movie that we like watched. Right. Like, I don't know if we had a videotape of it, like that my grandma taped off of cable and gave to us. I don't know if we had an edited version, but like I said, I remember it being risque. And the great part about it is it's not a vulgar movie except in certain points, which therefore makes it very funny when you hit in those areas.
And very editable for cable television too. Like, you can easily, either bleep out or cut the swear words and those scenes that make it risque, and you can put it on regular television, So I do remember like Beverly DeAngelo as being like one of these sexual beings in my adolescence. Like, I remember seeing her on screen, and she was one of those women that I just like first saw in films. So I was like, whoa, you know what I mean? I do remember that. And I do remember, like, especially, she gets naked a couple times in Vacations, and you're like, dude, as a kid, you're like, money, so those were very specific memories I have as an adolescent, maturing. And a lot of those 80s movies they were like those funny things, but then you might get a topless scene. So
it was like really unexpected. Like, nowadays there would be no reason to put those scenes in the movie, but they put them in there. They just threw them in, and it's almost like you remember them, but you also don't remember them. Right. So it's like one of those moments where you're like, oh yeah, this is a great family movie. And you're like, whoa, what's going on?
That's like an 80s thing. He's like, in all the horror movies, it was the same thing. Yeah. It was just like the gratuitous topless, girl coming out of the lake or something,
So let's talk a little bit of the origins of the movie. It's got a kind of an interesting story, starting in the Chicago blizzard of 1979. John Hughes, who we all love and know now, to going on to like directing and writing everything from the 80s. Yeah. He started developing a short story entitled Vacation 58. I don't know if you want to pick it up from there.
Well, he was writing for National Lampoon magazine, which I don't know if you're familiar with that at all. Its heyday was really in the 70s. So
kind of like Mad Magazine, right?
Well, that's kind of how I remember it. But I think that I'm mixing it up more with like Cracked magazine. Like, Cracked magazine was sort of like the alt Mad magazine. National Lampoon, from what I know now, really more from research than, getting firsthand knowledge of it. It was more like editorial and satire. It was a lot more written stuff, whereas like Mad Magazine and Crack magazines were just like strictly comic cartoons illustrated.
Sure.
So National Lampoon was more, like authors and stories and, that sort of satire, and very political and very off color too. Like that was the spiel in the 70s and 80s. Like the jokes and the things that you got away with then are way more off color than it's acceptable now. So that's why these movies kind of like are even better today, because you're not allowed to say half the shit that they say, like you can't laugh at it. Otherwise you're offending half the room. So
Sure.
I think that's what National Lampoon magazine was. I do remember getting sometime when I was a kid in the 80s, someone had given me like an old collection of comic books and a lot of old Mad magazines and Cracks. And there was a couple National Lampoons in there, but I don't have, more color to add to it than that. But I think it's an interesting story because, they were able to spin these magazines into a pretty successful like movie and media line. The first one being Animal House. So Animal House was a huge success, and I think John Hughes was tapped to write a movie trying to replicate the success of Animal House. And he did, an initial one called National Lampoon's Class Reunion, and it kind of bombed. It didn't go anywhere, but struck gold when he wrote when they adapted his story for Vacation.
Yeah, and I know that this was originally written for a vacation-themed issue, but then it was bumped and published in September 1979.
Yeah.
And then subsequently optioned by Warner Brothers. But they had a lot of trouble getting this movie actually approved. There was a lot of comments about it being, a road trip. It's too episodic.
Right.
And John Hughes is saying, well, yeah, it's a road trip. It is episodic. You're going from city to city. Things happen. Eventually, a guy named Mark Canton, who he really pulled for it to be made, and it was eventually adapted from his story into a screenplay.
I feel like that's the story of like a lot of really good movies. Like every house passes on it, and then like one person takes a chance and it blows up and becomes like the greatest movie of all time. Like you hear that a lot. What I think is interesting about this too is that like this is the first time that I can really recall where movies are really honoring the writer as opposed to the director, even though the director is Harold Ramis. Like if you research this movie, there's more about John Hughes and his writing of the short story than there is about Harold Ramis directing it or the directors of the other movies. Like this whole kind of vacation legacy is really centered around John Hughes as opposed to and Chevy Chase than really the directors or the producers of the movie, which is also kind of a unique thing to get that sort of recognition.
So let's start diving into the movie a little bit more. A big part of this movie and its success is ultimately the casting, which is perfection. There's no actors in here where you're like, oh, well, that person should have been swapped with somebody else. And I haven't heard too many stories of similar to the stories of screenplays being adapted and made into films. You always hear those things about, oh, well, this actor was supposed to play this role, this actor, this and that. Mm-hmm. I didn't hear a lot of that going into this movie. But again, they struck gold. I mean, starting obviously with the star, Chevy Chase. Like, he embodies Clark W. Griswold, affectionately known as Sparky by his wife.
Yeah.
Instantly a relatable character. I think people can see Clark Griswold in themselves. They can see that Clark Griswold in their dad.
Well, he was a pretty big name though at that point. It wasn't like he was a nobody actor that was just being cast because he was on SNL and he was, very popular character. So, they picked the right guy for this. But I think that's, his style of humor, on SNL and then all, in really his movies is sort of like that subtle everyman, with, just a little underlying like mania, you know, as opposed to like a Jim Carrey or a Chris Farley who are like over the top and in your face, you know. Chevy's always been kind of like more laid back and subtle humor. Although I did read something though, but speaking of other castings, I don't think there was anybody else other considered for the lead, but Beverly DeAngelo, who, you know, plays his wife, and I love. I heard that Kim Cattrall was originally considered to be Ellen. Yeah. So, you know, she eventually of Samantha fame from Sex and the City, but at the time she was actually in Porky's. She was in Mannequin. She was a pretty big 80s star too. So I think that was like sort of the other name that was attached to this movie before Beverly DeAngelo got it.
What I like about the Beverly DeAngelo casting is that she really didn't do much before. She was in a handful of movies, but this was like what she really became known for, and that's what she stayed known for. And so it kind of preserved her as this Ellen Griswold character. There's something special about that, you know, when it comes to Hollywood.
Yeah. And I think she played a great role now that I appreciate way more now, like the type of woman, like she's a cool mom. She's a good mom, but she's still like got that like sexy wife thing happening. You know what I mean? Which is a perfect, you know, spot for this movie because the relationship between all of these characters is really what drives and makes this film succeed is its believability, you know? And like Beverly DeAngelo is, I think, super hot, but like not too hot where she wouldn't be married to a guy like Clark Griswold. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Believable. It's very
totally believable. And their kids, like they look like their kids, you know, like Audrey looks like Clark and Rusty looks like Ellen, you know what I mean? So I think the casting in the first movie is brilliant.
Yeah. The kids, Anthony, Michael Hall, and Dana Barron, like you said, good choices.
Yeah.
It's cool that they could keep them for all the rest of the movies moving forward after this movie.
You mean the kids?
Yeah,
not the actors.
They could keep the consistent children, you know, that, right. You know, Rusty always looked the same. No, but like Anthony Michael Hall as Rusty, man, that guy went on a hot streak after this movie. Totally. It's really interesting because he did 16 Candles, Breakfast Club, and Weird Science. And prior to that, Vacation. And those were all 1983, 1984, 1985. And now he did some other movies. Yeah. But that hot streak of those films, like, to me, that's like what you remember him as, dominating the 80s.
Well, and then no coincidence, all those movies were written and directed by John Hughes. So, you know, which I think it's like any job, you can apply for a job, you might get it. But yeah, if you know somebody, the chances of you getting that job and networking is way greater. So clearly, you know, John, you know, writing Vacation, the Vacation movies and seeing, you know, Michael Anthony Hall play that Rusty role is like, dude, I'm going to take you and turn you into a star in these bigger movies. I got bigger ideas for you. And that's when John, like his directorial debut was 16 Candles his first one? I think 16 Candles was his first.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so. Yeah.
So, you know, you see like, hey, you trust your guys and you take them along with you on your path, you know? So you're only as good as the people that you work with. And you got a good one in Rusty, you know? Yeah.
And you see that as well with, we'll talk about him a little bit later, John Candy and John Hughes, and then also Harold Ramis and Bill Murray, like those. We'll touch on both those guys in a little bit, but yeah, like you said, they have a network, a team, family mentality that they can work together, and it's guaranteed magic formula for success.
Yeah.
Dana Barron, she didn't really do much after this movie. I know that she actually did reprise the role as Audrey in the movie that we're not even going to talk about at all today, which is Christmas Vacation 2.
I didn't, that was like, wasn't it direct to NBC or something?
Yeah, it was like made for TV.
Right.
We're sorry for those of you who tuned in to hear about our take on Christmas Vacation 2, but I did watch all of the movies aside from that one for
Yeah.
this.
Yeah.
This, but
Likewise.
moving on, there's some great side characters in this movie, starting right off the gate when Rusty and Clark go to pick up Clark's new Antarctic blue super sports wagon with the CB and optional rally fun pack at the car dealership. The car dealer is Eugene Levy,
Family truckster.
Ed, the car salesman. Eugene Levy, known from all the Christopher Guest movies.
He's awesome. That's when I really discovered him. I think was Best in Show, which
that's where he starts becoming the most recognizable.
And maybe that's his best. I don't know. Although I love Schitt's Creek too, and his son is fantastic in Schitt's Creek. Dan Levy is amazing. So I'm a big fan of all of that. And I don't know if they did much improvising in this movie. I suspect most of it was written because they had great writers for it, John Hughes in particular, but that's his bag. Like Eugene Levy is like a master of the ad lib and the improv. So super talented guy.
Getting the start on SCTV with like a lot of these stars.
Yeah.
In Chicago. And then some listeners probably recognize him. Some of our younger listeners would know him from the American Pie series.
Right. Totally.
Dad. But Schitt's Creek's come up a lot lately. Crystal loves Schitt's Creek. You love Schitt's Creek. My grandma, I just found out, loves Schitt's Creek. So I haven't personally watched it other than peripherally seen it. It looks hilarious. So it's good to see Eugene Levy still flourishing at this point in his career.
Totally.
Doing great stuff. He was also great in Spinal Tap.
I think he gives hope for any nerdy guy who wants to be an actor. Like, what a great career. You don't have to be like a muscly hunk to be like the leading man, Christie Brinkley,
the girl in the red Ferrari, iconic, hard to forget.
Right.
It's like one of those first things as a small child where you're like, oh, sports cars are cool.
Right.
She's driving that 1981 Ferrari 308 GTS with the license plate that says "Love Me." Like, it's kind of like teaching. It's like a teaching tool right there. It's like, okay, girl, white dress, red Ferrari. Foreign cars are cool.
Hot cars, hot chicks.
That's great, shows up multiple times. Mm-hmm. Shows up in sequels as well. And then the unforgettable Randy Quaid as Cousin Eddie.
Best.
Yeah, I mean that he may be, other than Chevy Chase, he may be the most quotable character in the series.
Yeah, I mean, I would say arguably I quote his lines more than I quote anybody else's lines. But after going back into the deep dive on these movies for the podcast, I appreciate so much more of all of the dialogue. But historically out throughout life, Cousin Eddie's one-liners are like timeless, dude,
We've got Aunt Edna, played by Imogene Coca, and she was best known for her role opposite Sid Caesar in Your Show of Shows. That's an old show. But she was concerned that she couldn't play such a mean character, because in her career, she'd always been not like this evil person.
Right.
So even during the filming, she was often concerned she was like being too mean to her cast members.
Yeah.
But nailed it. Like,
totally. Another example of just great casting, because like just her temperament and just like the looks that she makes without saying anything. We all have like an aunt like that. You know what I mean? We all have somebody in our family that's just like that. So these movies are really good, man. I mean, I'm glad that we're honoring them for this, because I think we all needed something a little lighthearted this year, so it's a good way to kind of end the year on these podcasts.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's kind of fun to tie this in. This one isn't a holiday movie, but the next one's a holiday movie.
Yeah.
We're just weeks away from Christmas.
Yeah.
Even just watching these in preparation, it's like, oh, this is a good palate cleanser from the 9 Nightmare on Elm Streets we just watched. I was like talking to Ken about this, and I'm like, okay, we just anything but horror right now, like
Right.
because that's all we've been consuming. A few more characters here. We got Jane Krakowski, who played cousin Vicky Johnson, the daughter of Eddie and Catherine. I
Mhm.
never realized that that was Jane Krakowski until recently.
Right.
Because she's
Well,
a
you
kid in
wouldn't
this
because
movie.
like the age difference between like this time you see her and then when you see her as an adult, like you don't realize it. You know, it's not like she's the Drew Barrymore where you see her like grow her whole
Yeah.
life on film. You know, there's a lot of people like that. You know, I mean, even going back, I forgot Eugene Levy was in this movie until I watched it again. I was like, oh, holy shit, you know. So those are kind of fun little things to see in the 80s when you see characters that are, you know, played by an actor and actress, and you realize who they are at such a young age and get to see their career, you know, many years later.
Yeah, and Jane, for those of you who aren't familiar with Jane Krakowski, she was in 30 Rock and Ally McBeal.
Yeah.
Just really has made a great career as an adult. And
the legend.
I mean, what can you say about the man, the legend, John Candy?
The legend. I think his connection to the movie was Harold Ramis had worked with him on Stripes initially, and he was also an SCTV guy with Eugene Levy and Harold Ramis. So again, kind of like that familiarity with your friends. But I think he got written into the movie sort of at the end because the original ending to the movie was a little bit more truer to John Hughes' short story, which is when the Griswolds get to Wally World, and actually it's Disneyland in the short story. When they get to Wally World or Disneyland in the short story and it's closed, he goes to Walt Disney's house and confronts him, ends up shooting the dog, ends up shooting Walt in the thigh. But when they actually shot it, apparently this film exists somewhere. I think I read an article where Chevy Chase says he has that cut somewhere, but I don't think it's ever been released on like, you know, DVD special or anything like that. But they had to rewrite it based off of, you know, audience reaction. So they wrote the John Candy part, you know, where they instead, you know, hijack and kidnap the park employee and do that. But I think he got paid. I read $1 million just for his cameo at the end, dude. In '83, that's a pretty big salary.
Yeah, $1 million, like a flat fee, and there again that's like the friend deal. Like, hey Ken, come be in my. That's like what I pay you for this. Like, I'm like, hey Ken, come be in my podcast. I'll give you $1 million. And like you said about the SCTV thing, he did play a character very similar, a Canadian security guard.
Yeah.
And so Ramis wanted him to adapt that character to the Russ Lasky character that he plays at Walt.
Did you read the Hughes short story? You can find it pretty easily on the internet.
No, I haven't dug that up yet. I was meaning to.
It's pretty. The movie is actually pretty loyal to the writing, to the original short story, with the exception of the ending, that being the biggest stray. And there's some other minor things. They depart from Detroit, Michigan instead of Chicago. There are other little things like when they leave Dinky on the bumper and the cop pulls him over, the dog is actually still attached to the leash. And the cop man, that's the dead dog. I was like, dude, if they had left that in the movie, that would have been awesome. But like even down to like the names of the characters were all pretty accurate. So I found that kind of cool. Like as a pure, like I'm one of those guys that always compares the book to the movie.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah. Especially like my Stephen King stuff. I'm like, you know, no, that wasn't in the book, man. So I did that for this reason. I'm like, I'm curious. I never really, you know, let me see how, you know, a short story for a comedy would be translated. And, it's actually pretty accurate.
So do you feel like the newer Stephen King adaptations are more true to the books? than the ones from the 70s and 80s?
It totally depends. There's no
Yeah.
rhyme or reason to that answer. Some are pretty darn close of it. Like Gerald's Game that was released on Netflix was pretty good adaptation of the book. The revisits of the It movies they put some little things in the movie that were call outs to the book that I thought were probably unnecessary because he was very specifically trying to nod to parts of the story. But then other things are wildly more adaptive. So there's no blanket answer that is a generalization for that. But they're re-releasing The Stand this month, like December 16th or something like that on TV, their miniseries, which they did a Stand miniseries back in the 90s with like Rob Lowe and et cetera, which I watched.
Yeah,
I'm actually rereading the unabridged book right now. And I'm like on page 800 something, and I still have like another 400 to go. So add that to the list of shit that I'm trying to do in December because I want to finish the book before the miniseries comes out, so that I can be that guy that be like, this was not this shouldn't be in the movie, But
I had a 400-page head start on you, and you're still going to finish the book before me. So
I might just have
I've been
DVR
very slow going. I still got a stack of comic books, like humongous, that I'm trying to finish reading to get caught up.
It's a beast of a book, dude. So I'm looking forward to that miniseries, though.
So the last character from this film that I was going to talk about was Eddie Bracken, starring as Roy Wally, very much an homage to Roy Disney and Walt Disney. The significance here is another John Hughes connection. Mm-hmm. Eddie Bracken actually plays Duncan, in the guy who owns and operates Duncan Toy Chest in Home Alone 2 in New York City. So that was something that stood out to me immediately as a huge Culk head and Home Alone fan. I was very excited to see. I didn't remember him playing the Roy Wally character. It's been many years since I paid attention to that. We talked a little bit about Harold Ramis. He directed this film. Harold Ramis, what a guy. He can direct, he can act, he can write. He directed Caddyshack, Groundhog Day, wrote Animal House, Meatballs, Stripes, Ghostbusters. He acted in Stripes. He obviously is Egon Spengler in Ghostbusters 1 and 2, which I know we're both fans of the Ghostbusters franchise. Sure.
He's a triple threat, man. He's a director, writer, producer, actor. He's a quadruple threat. He does it all. I think that's really interesting too, because you see that, but I don't think it's common. Sometimes actors morph into directors, eventually, but doing it sort of simultaneously that young in his career is pretty neat. I've never acted, I don't know, but it just seems like that would be a very, it's like Bo Jackson, you know what I mean? Like playing two sports at the same time, man, that's tough to do. But being able to act and direct in like smash hits at that time too, that's a lot,
Well, and talking about, people working so closely together, I mean, I'm starting to go through the list. I'm like, wow, Bill Murray's in like every movie that he wrote or directed or acted in. Pretty cool to see. And you see, again, that recipe for success. And so much of this, like the Harold Ramis films and the John Hughes films, I was born in 1982. So this is my life, every movie that I was exposed to was in some way touched by those two guys. And a lot of that is about, especially John Hughes movies, is about like being a teenager and, that whole thing coming about, coming to age films. So just incredible. We talked a bit about the short story being about Disneyland. To avoid the legal troubles, they changed the name to sound-alikes. You got Wally World. He even sing the Marty Moose theme song, which sounds suspiciously like the Mickey Mouse Club theme song. Roy Wally's appearance bears similarities to Disney, and his name is similar to Roy Disney, Walt Disney's brother. There's some other things here, though. The scenes that were shot in the parking lot, they're running through the parking lot. That was actually the Santa Anita racetrack. The actual park that they go to is a Six Flags park. It's Magic Mountain in Valencia, California. And a lot of it's just like 80s film magic with the the distance shots, that's all painted. And
painted backgrounds. Yeah.
Yeah.
Pre-CGI, all that would be CGI now, but back then they were just getting like a big board and painting a matte picture on it and placing it in the background. It kind of looks like it too if you look closely, but it's still effective. It's cool.
Well, and it's weird because like at the coming of age of CGI, a lot of times the paintings look better than the CGI.
Mm-hmm.
Like where you're like, oh, that doesn't look good.
When it's funny, a friend of mine, actually the guy who split the driving with me when I drove the RV across the country this summer to get my mother, he managed the Six Flags in Vacaville, California. So when I read this, that it was filmed in Valencia, California, immediately I read Vacaville instead of Valencia. And I was like, oh, shit, that's the same place that Jay managed. And then I was like, no, it's not. That's way too random. But, these theme parks, I grew up on the East Coast. So we went to Disney World? Disney World.
Yeah, Disney World.
In Florida and Epcot Center. But we had
the best.
We had a Six Flags Great Adventure in Jersey that I used to go to. There's another one, Action Park in Jersey. It's sort of infamous. Netflix did that movie called Class Action Park.
Yeah.
Have you seen that?
I haven't seen it yet, but it's definitely on the list. And I know there was a regular full feature film starring Johnny Knoxville about that place too.
Those places that you should watch that documentary. It's pretty funny. I never went to Action Park. I definitely heard of it. I grew up about an hour from Vernon, so I know where it was. But these types of like amusement parks, these theme parks were like, I mean, they still are. They're big destinations. Before COVID, our plan was to take Jacob my 5-year-old to Legoland this year for his birthday. Yeah. And we actually have the tickets and we have the reservation. They won't cancel it. We have to keep rolling it forward until they reopen the park. But I mean, that's like a big part of Americana, these theme parks, taking your family to them. And it was a big part of my adolescence too, going to the Great Adventure in Jersey. In fact, there was this roller coaster called the Ultra Twister, and it like spins you upside down and it shoots you up in the air and then it drops you down into like a free fall. So it spun us upside down. It went up like 100 feet and then the thing got stuck. And I was stuck suspended upside down for like 45 minutes. And the whole thing just like, it just stopped working. And it was
holy crap.
Me and my mother's boyfriend, because my parents were divorced. And I remember this clear as day. They had to bring up like the emergency elevator. Like there's like basically like a little platform that kind of rides the side of the metal railing. And these guys came with like blowtorches and cut the straps off of all of my God, harnesses to let us out and brought us each down this elevator shaft. And all we got out of it, they were like, you can go to the front of the line on any other ride. And in the meantime, I was like 11. And in the meantime, my mother is like down on the parking lot, like the ground below me, like screaming the entire time. And I was fine. We were all fine. I'm like, Mom, you're not helping.
Oh man.
But, these movies kind of like bring those memories back. It's a big part of all our childhoods, these theme parks.
Yeah, we had there was a program called 600 Minutes, and I think it was through like Pizza Hut. If you read 600 Minutes, then you got a free ticket to Six Flags Great America, which is just north of Chicago. I grew up in Milwaukee area. So we would go down every year. We get our free ticket and we'd go down to the Six Flags down there. Yeah. So similar memories. And there's a lot of questions about this movie. They're like, well, why did the Griswolds not go to Six Flags Great America if they're living right outside of Chicago? Why did they have to go to Wally World? I mean, there is a big difference between Disney and Six Flags.
Sure.
So that's justifiable. And then you don't get the whole road trip experience. Right. And that would be a pretty boring movie for a 20-minute drive. But definitely a lot of great memories of going to Six Flags every summer with the family and doing always something to look forward to. So talking about this film a little bit further, there are a lot of our moments that I guess there's too many moments to even like talk about everything that goes on in this film. But But some things that stand out to me is just like the slapstick comedy element to this.
Mm-hmm.
And I think slapstick comedy, it gets me every time. Like, it's timeless, going back to, the golden age of Hollywood. Like, you see guys doing funny things, beating themselves up, falling off of things. It's still funny to this day.
Right.
And Chevy Chase is a guy that, like, his comedy is like this low-key comedy thing. So when he does this slapstick stuff, it's just hilarious. One of those instances being when he's going to fill up the truckster for the first time with gas, and he can't find where to put the gas in. And he's looking around. The woman on the pump next to him is very common at that time. You'd fill in your tank up with opening up your license plate. You pull on the license plate there, you pull the gas cap off, and you fill up. So he's trying to pull that down, and he ends up just completely ripping the license plate off, almost hitting the woman in the head.
Yeah, I think that scene too was partially accidental. I think he was supposed to pull the license plate off, but I think he ripped it so hard and he threw it by accident and nearly hit the woman that was like the actress that was, playing the bystander over there. And she remained in character while it whizzed right past her head.
Yeah, it was very violently thrown at her. Could have been a pretty dangerous situation.
Yeah, I mean, these movies, I think you mentioned the slapstick. I think the first one is actually less slapstick. The later on, Vacation, the franchise gets more slapstick.
Yeah, absolutely.
This is more subtle, and I think a lot of the humor in this comes out more in the dialogue and the conversation. Particularly like Cousin Eddie, like in this movie, his humor is just everything he says. And if you don't really listen to it carefully, sometimes you miss some of the things that he says. Later on in the franchise, like when he's in Vegas, he comes out like in scuba gear, like in the casino. That's just dumb, kitschy slapstick stuff. But in this movie, he's like introducing his daughter, and she's like, she's born without a tongue, Clark. But don't you worry, she whistles like a bird and eats like a horse. Like that's funny. That's like, and if you're not listening, it just comes out quick and you miss it. But this movie in particular, and then in Christmas Vacation, are two of the better ones from the franchise, where it's all about the dialogue and the, that conversational tone between the characters.
Well, and the characters are unexpected and very quickly developed. So you're like, oh, it's this kind of guy, whether it's a family member that you might have met or a friend of a friend, or even like someone that you've done, through work, either a coworker or a customer. You get some very interesting characters as you move around this very fine country of ours.
Yeah. Yes.
Staying on track with the Cousin Eddie, I mean, because he's a well of nonstop one-liners. One of my personal favorite was when he's talking to Clark and he's like, I don't know why they call it Hamburger Helper, Clark. It does just fine by itself. And you're like, wait, what? What does that mean? There's no meat in that?
What is Hamburger Helper exactly? Is it like breading?
He makes a statement that he prefers tuna helper personally. So he's just cooking up just the little mix that you add the meat to, I guess.
What is it though? Really? Is it like a
I think it's just seasoning
or breadcrumbs or something? I mean,
I think it's just like seasoning, powdered seasoning that makes it like, it'd be like making a sloppy Joe, I think, but from a powder as opposed to a liquid.
Yeah. Well, the characters, the main characters in these franchises are great, but there's some awesome like little side characters that are perfect. When they go camping, they're kind of in between states and they're camping, and he's reserving the campsite. The clerk comes out and he's eating watermelon, and then he just starts spitting the seeds in his hand. He's like, and he just spits them into his hand as he's collecting them, which to me is so hilarious, and it's so understated in the movie. And Clark, and he's switching hands with the watermelon and spitting in different hands. And I'm like, I want to do that this summer and see if anybody catches it. But Clark's filling out the questionnaire, and he's like, what do you need my address for? And he's like, we like to send out a mailer. Like, it's just throwaway line. It has no relationship or context to the rest of the movie, but it's perfectly delivered. And it's just this example of the subtle humor in this movie, which makes it work so brilliantly. I love that scene. It's just awesome.
Well, and that actor there, who has a very small part. I don't know if you know this, but that's actually Brian Doyle Murray. That's Bill Murray's older brother.
I know it now. I didn't know it when I was watching it, and in fact, I've been staring at this actor, I guess, all of my life, and did not realize that was Bill Murray's brother.
Yeah, he's been in like every 80s movie, and he shows up and he's always in a small role. He he just kind of always goes unnoticed. Often he has a mustache.
Yeah.
As he gets older, his voice gets kind of raspier.
Yep.
And which is very signature. He was on SCTV, he was on Saturday Night Live. As you mentioned, he played that Camp Comfort clerk.
And he looks like Bill Murray. Once you know that he's his brother, if you really look at him, like, oh, you could see the family resemblance there.
It makes sense. And then he ends up showing up in the third film, Christmas Vacation, as Frank Shirley, Clark's boss.
The boss.
So it kind of comes full circle. But he's one of those guys that I call the oh, hey, it's that guy. Like my whole life, I'm like, oh, it's that guy. He's always in these movies. Like
Ron Howard's brother.
Yes. You're like, oh, it's that guy. And you're like, I don't know his name, but like,
right.
He's
which I don't know his name either, but he's always kind of weird looking, but yeah, I don't know. That movie's awesome. And I like this scene too. Another example, like where there's a secondary character that makes like an awesome liner is like he gets pulled over by the cop and he's like, you know why I pulled you over? And he's like, no, I have no idea. And it turns out he was dragging Aunt Edna's dog on the leash. And he's like, he probably kept up with you for the first mile or so. He goes, do you know what the penalty for animal cruelty is in this state? He's like, no, sir, I don't. He's like, well, it's probably pretty stiff. It's awesome. It's a great interaction. And just probably one of those things on set that was hilarious,
Probably my favorite scene of this movie, and it's very similar with Christmas Vacation, is towards the end where Clark is just losing it. He is just cracked. They're almost to Wally World, but everyone just wants to go home. They've just had enough. I think based on our conversation early in this podcast, I think both of us can attest to what it's like when you're motivated and you're pushing and you're getting everything done. And all of a sudden everyone around you is just bailing and they're like, no, it's fine. We don't have to do this. And you're like, damn it. No, we're doing it because we have gone this far. We are at the gates of hell. We are going to get this done. This scene in specific, Clark says, I think you're all effed in the head. We're 10 hours from the effing fun park. You want to bail out? Well, I'll tell you something. This is no longer a vacation. It's a quest.
Right.
It's a quest for fun. You're going to have fun, and I'm going to have fun. We're all going to have so much effing fun. We're going to need plastic surgery to remove our goddamn smiles. You'll be whistling zippity-doo-dah out of your assholes. I must be crazy. I'm on a pilgrimage to see a moose. Praise Marty Moose. Holy shit.
He's every man, like he's always kind of calm, but under the surface it's boiling, and then it explodes. I'm like great at that. That's like my signature move. Like I'm gonna be chill until I just explode all over you, and he's perfect in these movies for that. And his freakouts are totally epic.
Well, and it's perfect writing because it's like a soft boil until it gets to that point and it crescendos.
Yeah.
And they always figure out the perfect place to put the crescendo in the film to ensure that like from that crescendo till the end of the film, you ride it out and you walk out of the theater or your living room or wherever being like, wow, what a fantastic movie.
Yeah.
So in digging into this film, doing some research, there's a lot of things like any movie that you start finding out things that you never noticed before.
Little nuggets.
One of those fun facts for you. I often call them fail hour fun facts, named after our third amigo. Is the poster art for these films, and specifically the first two, European Vacation. They have this epic painterly poster done by Boris Vallejo. Boris Vallejo is one of the well-known fantasy painters. These posters very much pay an homage to his classic Conan the Barbarian poster art. I think Vallejo, along with Frank Franzetta, are just like
those are the fantasy guys,
fantasy icons, and especially at that time, the late 70s, early 80s, like that was the heyday of a lot of this.
It was like all that heavy metal magazine cover art, like all that kind of D&D stuff that was happening, you know, and it's timeless too. That style is very recognizable.
Well, and then to see it adapted for like a comedy like this, a family comedy,
awesome.
Just, and it kind of echoes, like the art echoes scenes from the movie, but at the same time, you're like, I don't remember it looking like that.
Right. You know, we touched on this in other podcasts too, where like the movie posters in the 80s were like way more iconic and a part of the branding than they seem to be now, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
But icon of vacation. What about the Wagon Queen family truckster?
Amazing.
That's actually not a real station wagon. That was it was based off a Ford Country Squire station wagon, 79. And it was designed by George Barris. Barris Custom Cars in LA back in that time frame had actually made a lot of really cool custom cars for TV. He was credited with making the Munster coach. They didn't design, but they built the Batmobile from the 60s Batman series. Cool. And they did like a lot of celebrity custom car and kind of like built that culture in that era. Now it's like, you know, every other TV on Discovery Channel is like a custom car show. But yeah, the Queen family truckster kind of started that. And I think that this movie basically like just destroyed station wagon sales in the early 80s forever. Like it basically, I think it really did it. Like this was like nobody bought station wagons after this movie. So I think that's kind of funny.
Man, if only he would have got that Antarctic Blue Super Sports Wagon with the CB and optional rally pack.
The grill on that car too.
I think with that, I think that sales would have been booming. Speaking of this car, one of my favorite scenes in the whole movie is when the car vaults off the closed road. And Rusty says to Clark, "Wow, Dad, we must have jumped that rail by like 50 yards. And Clark kind of like downplays it, like that's not cool. But then he's got like this look on his face, like very proud of himself.
Yeah.
But the fun fact here is that there was actually a bet.
Right.
Several of the crew members had made bets against the second unit director, Dick Zeicher, that he couldn't jump the car more than 50 feet. So they even drew lines in the sand to measure the distance, and Zeicher won the bet. He made it the 50 feet. So it's cool because watching that, I just assumed that it was some sort of special effects, or maybe it's a model car, or you know, typical 80s stuff that they do to accomplish this. But then when you find out that they actually jumped the car and they did make it 50 yards, not 50 feet, 50 yards. That's really far.
That's ridiculous. You gotta have some speed up there. I mean, it's funny too, like it's such like an improbable event that the crew is gonna bet on it, you know? So I think that's pretty badass. Howard Ramis must have been. I think that they made 5 of these cars for the movie because there was obviously different levels of destruction throughout the entire movie filming it, so they needed multiple. And after they made this jump scene and the car was trashed to a certain point, then they had to make the other cars trashed as well, so it matched the look in other scenes filming later on in the thing. So you know, Ramis had a pretty decent budget for you know, car destruction in this film. And another little fun fact, speaking of Ramis, actually he's the voice of Marty Moose later on when they visit the Wally World at the end, and he goes up to that sign and the moose is standing there and he's like, it's closed for maintenance, and Clark punches it. That's Harold's voice coming out of there. So multi-talented, including voiceover.
I wanted to mention as well that one of our listeners wrote in and said metallic P, which is the correct color of the truckster.
That's right.
And I just wanted to remind all of our listeners, if you're listening right now, welcome to the show. You're listening live on YouTube right now. If you're listening to this on the audio only version and playing back, just a reminder that we post the audio only version the Monday after these air live. But if you tune in live, you can ask us questions, you can interact, and you can become part of the show. So
and see some amazing visuals.
Yeah, and that's, I would say, the big advantage. People would say, well, why would you watch a podcast on YouTube? Well, basically, the YouTube version is like a little TV show here. So there's visuals that go along to everything we're talking about. And I would recommend for movie podcasts like this, try to watch the movie before the podcast, because then you're going to enjoy yourself that much more, or watch the movie right after, because then you're going to notice all these things that you probably hadn't noticed before. In the scene at the end of Vacation, the one that you were talking about that was not filmed, the whole idea was that Roy Wally is kidnapped, whatnot. So because that didn't make it into this movie, they basically reused that for Christmas Vacation, which is the next movie that we're about to talk about. So it's kind of cool to see that they may not have used that from the short story about Vacation, but 2 movies later, they actually take that same idea and apply it for Christmas Vacation. Which brings us to Christmas Vacation. Christmas Vacation was released on December 1st, 1989. It's the 3rd film in the Vacation series. In this film, it's Christmas time, and the same Griswolds we know and love are preparing for a family seasonal celebration, but things never run smoothly for Clark, his wife Ellen, and their 2 children, Rusty and Audrey. Clark's continual bad luck is only worsened by his obnoxious family guests, but he manages to keep going, knowing that his Christmas bonus is due soon. Or is it? So Ken, what are your initial thoughts about this film, and what makes it such a holiday classic standout movie?
Well, I'm seeing a trend in movies that we podcast where like the first movie's great, the second movie not so great, and then the third movie is great again. So I think that's something that we're seeing here. European Vacation being sandwiched between these two. Had some moments, but certainly not like Christmas Vacation. They all were written by John Hughes, though. So I thought maybe John Hughes took a vacation on the second one, no pun intended. But he wrote them. He wrote the first 4 actually. So this is just a better movie. The reason why I think it's a relatable holiday classic it's a holiday classic for the same reason as the first one is. It's relatable. It feels like Christmas. It feels like, to me, an East Coast Christmas too, where the outside's covered in snow, and it doesn't look like fake snow. Like it looks like it's legitimately shot in Chicago, where the cars are frozen, outside if they're parked overnight. It feels cold. Your relatives all show up at the door at the same time. There's that awkward conversation when they come in. It's very real at its core. This one's a little bit more slapstick than the first one is. Trees falling through windows all the time and the sledding stuff. I mean, there's a lot more of that sort of goofiness that's just like movie speak. I think the first Vacation is a lot more realistic than this one, but still at its core, it comes down to family relationships that are very believable, set at holiday time, which is all very believable. When they go shopping, the interactions at the dinner table. We've all lived those moments every year, our entire lives. It works. And let's be honest, there's a ton of shitty Hallmark Christmas movies that nobody wants to watch, but there's probably, a handful of good holiday movies that you're like, I can watch this every year and enjoy it every year. And boom, this is one of them. you know?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I definitely, from being a child until now, I watch this every year.
Yeah.
And I think European Vacation, it wasn't as good as Vacation. I felt like it was in line with the theme, but just some things weren't firing.
Right.
Just things were amok, and it also was like the traditional, like, okay, what do we do? Okay, we did Die Hard. Let's now do Die Hard on a bus. You know what
Right.
I mean? Like it's
Right.
that, like, let's take a theme and just, okay, it's American road trip. Now it's a European road trip. Like,
Right.
but
Recreate the magic.
Christmas Vacation comes in with this like newfound energy, the animated intro, the title card. I think they did a clever thing of having the station wagon right off the bat, but it's a more modern station wagon. That station wagon looks like the station wagon that I grew up with, the Ford Taurus wagon that I had. And that was actually my first car.
Was it?
The Ford Taurus station wagon that my parents drove me to Six Flags in.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
So it all comes full circle. But like you said, like it's that whole thing about the interactions between your immediate family, your extended family, your in-laws, the surprise people showing up.
Yeah, the relatives you don't want there. Yeah.
I love the, like, I call it like the doom doorbell scene where like the doorbell rings and then it gets lower and lower, and both sets of parents are at the front door at the same time, which is always how it works. Like you're trying to get everything ready. It isn't like a slow people coming in. It's like all of a sudden, boom, everybody's here and we're not completely ready. And it's all, everything's out of control. But I love this film. I mean, I don't know how much more to say about it. Very similar origins for this one. Again, National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation originates from writer John Hughes. This time it's called Christmas 59, and it was published in the December 1980 issue of National Lampoon magazine. This
short story is very different, though, than what ended up being the movie, the translation for the movie. I mean, there's some similarities, but like very little of it. The biggest difference in this one is the grandmother brings over a Thai. He's a Thai college student he's from not Taiwanese. He's from Thailand. He's like a college student that had been working around his grandmother's help, doing odd chores. He was like an exchange student at school. Had nowhere to go, so he comes, and it's written the way that the short story is written. He has like all of like the stereotypical like Japanese phonetic bad English pronunciation. So it comes off like when you read this, you're like, oh dude, this is really off color, and very obviously written, at that time frame.
So that was published in 1980. And what year? 1983 is 16 Candles.
Right. Exactly.
Which has a character very similar to that.
Exactly how he was talking in that movie is how the character, his name was Zhang Wo, was the name in the short story. That's how they wrote his lines in the short story. Exactly how that character in 16 Candles was speaking. So when you read it, you're like, oh dude, when you read it now, you're like, this is terrible. But in that movie, or in the short story, basically he's an integral part of the plot. Like he keeps stealing everything. Like they find him in the basement and he's like stealing Clark's tools and putting them in bags. He's stealing presents. And at the end, he like runs out and steals a car and is reversing it out of the driveway. And then he gets hit by an ambulance that has come because one of the grandmothers like had a heart attack or something. So the ambulance hits him and he comes out, and then one of the boys got a BB gun as a present and then like shoots him and puts the gun to his eye and like holds him down until the police come. And that's the short story. So it's very, very different than the movie version of it. Whereas the first one, the ending was different, but the majority of the short story the movie was accurate to the short story. So this was a bigger stray, obviously.
I'm sure to by 1989, with all of John Hughes' success, that there was a lot more studio support too, and just making sure to on December 1st for the holiday season that you're going to release a very good product. And I think that comes through versus the European Vacation. It looks like they're like, we're going to print another one.
Right.
Whereas Christmas Vacation seems more well thought out. Another Home Alone connection to this film, and John Hughes wrote both Home Alone and the Vacation movies. Director Chris Columbus, who directed Gremlins, was initially set to direct Christmas Vacation, but there was a big personality clash between Chevy Chase and Chris Columbus. I've heard that a lot about Chevy Chase, that he's very hard to work with. I think it's one of those, like, he's a genius and he knows he's a genius, therefore he's hard to work with. Which isn't the greatest way to be, but in the end you get these great products. And so that's why Chris Columbus was replaced by Jeremiah S. Chechik. And but then Hughes gives Columbus the Home Alone script and says, go direct this, which honestly ended up being a bigger film for him.
That was like the movie really that sort of cemented his career, Home Alone. That was huge.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, you're looking at the 80s. He locked that in. And then when you can redo that in the 90s. So our cast, a lot of recurring characters here. We got Chevy Chase returning as Clark Griswold, Beverly DeAngelo returning as Alan Griswold. But here's the curveball. The kids have been recast. And they've been recast. Oh yeah. For the third time, second time they've been recast, third set of kids, totally different looking, totally different age, same names. You've got Johnny Galecki coming in as Rusty this time. Johnny Galecki, most people probably know him from Roseanne. He was in I Know What You Did Last Summer. And most recently, he's had huge success with The Big Bang Theory. I never realized that was Johnny Galecki.
Yeah, I mean, well, you wouldn't either because, that's like one of the first things that he did. But what I didn't get was, why didn't they age the kids appropriately, like in the timeline of the story? You know what I mean? It's like The Simpsons. They don't age 20 years later. They're still the same age. But clearly, Clark and Beverly have aged, but the kids have not.
And the age difference between the two, like take the first movie, for example. In the beginning of the movie, Rusty's the younger brother.
Right.
And by the end of the movie, because he had a growth spurt, he was the older brother.
Right.
And there was even scenes where like Anthony Michael Hall is actually taller than Beverly DeAngelo in the end scenes because of that growth spurt. There's weird stuff. But clearly in this movie, Rusty's the younger brother.
Yeah. And
the older sister is Juliette Lewis, who again is another very famous actor in her own right.
Yep.
She's been in Cape Fear, Natural Born Killers, loved her in From Dusk Till Dawn. And I think most recently she's probably known as a musician with Juliet and the Licks. I don't know. Are you familiar with Juliet and the Licks at all?
Not at all. That's actually news to me. I was gonna say I didn't know that. I didn't know she was a musician.
Yeah, they're like a more of a garage rock kind of band, rock and roll band. Good stuff. My story with Juliette Lewis is 2016 went to Riot Fest, Riot Fest in Chicago, 3-day music festival. One of my favorite music festivals, just because the way that they do it, it's less of the like, oh, all these bands are going on tour this year and they all just happen to be at the same festivals all around the country. Riot Fest kind of has their festivals exclusive to their show. The first Misfits reunion I saw was at Riot Fest. I've seen Morrissey at Riot Fest, No Doubt, Snoop Dogg, Wu-Tang Clan. Like, it's just all over the place. 9 Inch Nails. I saw the Rob Zombie doing Astro Creep 2000. He did that concert there, which you can buy on vinyl. But one of the bands I went and saw early in the day at that festival was Dee Snider. This was like his big new solo record with his new band, but it was like him trying to do a totally different type of music.
Right.
He didn't really do any Twisted Sister. He was trying to kind of break out of that mold. I'm telling you, like 30 people watching him. Like it was tough to watch because I'm in the front row. I'm enjoying myself.
I was gonna say, I don't think that's actually a bad album. I kind of like it. I don't love it, but it's not bad.
This is before the Jamie Jost album that came out last year.
Oh, okay. Never mind. That's what I thought you were referring to.
Jamie Jost produced D. Snyder album is what he should have been doing. And I know that they're going back in the studio to do another album with Jamie. So I really think that's a killer album. It made my top 10 last year of albums for the year. But the previous album was more like an alternative rock album, if you will.
So it's awkward. Nobody's there. And...
Yeah, it probably came out in 2015. It's awkward. There's nobody really watching him. But I'm kind of getting off track a little bit here, but later in the day, I go and I see the band Chevy Metal perform on one of the big stages. Chevy Metal is Taylor Hawkins, the drummer of Foo Fighters, with the guitarist from the Foo Fighters, Chris Shiflett. They do like this metal covers band called Chevy Metal, and it's just all metal covers. But what they do is when they play festivals, they get people from other bands to join them on stage.
Nice.
So first of all, I witness D. Snyder goes up. He plays Mississippi Queen, Mountain cover. He also does Tie Your Mother Down by Queen with that's a Queen there, Mississippi Queen, and then a Queen cover, Tie Your Mother Down. So they do those two songs with D. Snyder. Juliette Lewis is playing with Juliette and the Licks the same day. So she comes up on stage and does Ain't Talking About Love, Van Halen cover. Crowd goes off. Just phenomenal situation.
Good,
decent singer, great. And I would also give a shout out. She appears on Always Outnumbered, Never Outgunned, the album by The Prodigy. She shows up on a few tracks on that album.
That's a cool fun fact.
Yeah, so I'm just kind of going down the music hole of Juliette Lewis, but yeah, Audrey Griswold, rock star.
The return of Cousin Eddie. I mean, is he the best character in Vacation? These two movies. I mean, his role in this is definitely expanded because of, I think, the popularity of his character in the first one. That's for sure. He's got a lot more dialogue. He's got a lot more zingers.
I think that when just his appearance alone, like when he shows up on the scene, it's right after Clark has finally got the lights going and everybody's talking to him, congratulating him and whatever. And he's going, it's almost like a receiving line. And all of a sudden this person's talking to him and it's Cousin Eddie, and they're there and they pulled up in his front yard with an RV. What an entrance. Can you imagine seeing that in the theater for the first time? And that's how you're introduced to a returning character.
You know, what I think is the subtleties of these movies. His attire during all these things, the clothing choices that he makes are awesome. He's wearing the white shoes that he gives Clark as a gift in the first one when he's in that kind of like that all white outfit and they're drinking eggnog, dude. It's just looking at him, it makes you laugh.
Well, and he has like two main looks. He has like the rednecky beater look, and when his hair is usually not done, and then he has like the fancy look where he slicks back his hair. He's maybe got a nice jacket. He's always got the big collar on his shirt.
Right.
His clothes are always slightly off date. You know,
they're very, very out of date. Yeah.
Miriam Flynn returns as his wife, Katherine Johnson. Also a very solid, she just helps add to that which is Cousin Eddie by expanding their family and their innumerable children. Nicholas Guest and Julia Louis-Dreyfus are incredible in this movie too, as the Griswolds' yuppie neighbors. What I find hilarious about their characters is it kind of, a lot of the vacation movies show how times have changed and there's certain trends and things, but these two audaciously go jogging.
Oh, I was gonna say they're matching aluminum looking jogging suits.
They go jogging. They drink water out of bottles.
Right.
But back then that was such a yuppie thing to make fun of, and now it's Now it's like if you don't go jogging and you don't drink bottled water, you're just some sort of freak. But
you know, the house that they were in, that the house that they lived in was on the is this a Warner Brothers movie or Paramount movie?
I think Warner Brothers.
Warner Brothers. The house was on the Warner Brothers lot, and that was the house where Roger Murtaugh, Lethal Weapon, where his family lived. That's
really?
Yeah, it's the same house. Which, you know, doing some fact finding for this podcast, I thought it was a little funny nugget.
The last cast member, we've talked about him a few times already, but Brian Doyle Murray as Frank Shirley, Clark's boss. This role is more, I think, the type of role that he's more well known for.
I was just about to say, this is the look that he looks like more often than not, too. You know what I mean? Like more balding, the mustache, you know.
This reminds me, just looking at this photo of him in his pajamas, actually reminds me that he was the mayor in Groundhog Day.
Right.
So another Bill Murray movie with his brother was in it as the mayor. A lot of favorite moments here. Just starting off the movie, like I mentioned, them driving in that station wagon, that Ford Taurus. There's the scene. There's a truck that pulls up behind him. Clark's like, "Hey, look, kids," and he like points the other way, flips off the truck. Which in turn they end up getting lodged under a logging truck, and just what an outrageous scenario that ends up catapulting them off of a snowbank, reminiscent of the first movie in the desert.
Totally. I always, you know where my head goes in these movies, but I mean, it's relatable, you know, like, you know, your dad, you're an older, you know what I mean? You basically hung it up a long time ago. You're not in the game anymore. And you go to the department store and there's like the hot, you know, lingerie or cosmetics chick. I love this scene. I love this scene because it's great Chevy Chase acting. He's like, can I help you? He's like, "Oh, I'm just browsing, you know," and he starts to like panic, and it's very, very well done. He's like, "It's a bit nipply out. I mean, nippy out." He's like, "What did I say, nipple?" You know, and it's so awkward. You could like feel the tension, but really, really, really funny. You know, older male, younger hot chick. It's like, it's classic, but it's perfect.
Yeah, I like that when he's like ogling her, showing that there's like no line, and then his son walks up. He's like, "Oh, look, Russ!"
Right in that moment, man. You know.
Speaking of the yuppie neighbors, I love when they come home and they find Clark. You know, he's walking out of the garage with a chainsaw, looking like Jason Voorhees. They're like, Todd's like, "Hey, Griswold, where are you gonna put a tree that big?" Because they have this tree that's not going to fit in their living room. Clark, just without missing a beat, is like, "Bend over and I'll show you." Todd's like, "You've got some nerve talking to me like that, Griswold." Clark wasn't talking to him. Which insinuates he's talking to Margot.
I think these movies are really, really well written, and the delivery of these characters are perfect. This one, like we mentioned earlier, is a little bit more slapstick. Like the whole sled scene was a little bit more slapstick.
Yeah.
Although, I mean, you know, there's this sort of weird, I'm going to honor the story and have this continuation of story, but then I'm not. Like, so he's like a food additive preservative employee in everyone. Like, he has the same job, and this, you know, he comes up with like, you know, this slick, whatever this product was for initially. It's clearly coming out of his company, and he puts it on the sled, and it, you know, that's the slapstick part, like shooting down the thing. But what I think is funnier about it is like when he's trying to get Eddie to go on it, and Eddie's like, you know, I've got a metal plate in my head, you know, because of the war or whatnot. And he's like, "You see, well, right underneath this here part, see over here, nothing. But if this gets dented, my hair just ain't going to look right," you know? And I think that that's hilarious. I think the way that he delivers those lines, it's that subtle, weird kind of thing we talked about before with Eddie. Like, if you don't listen to what he's saying, you're going to miss something that's pretty funny.
Yeah, and I think you can never hear it all. Like, even if you watch us every year, you pick up on something else that he says that you might not have caught the first time. I really like the slapstick element. I just remember my whole life laughing out loud when he shoots off just like a bolt of lightning because of that lubricant on the sled. And it's of the times when he's like, later, dudes.
Yeah.
And he shoots down the hill. I think the most quotable part of this movie for myself and my father is probably the whole part of the blessing. Clark's, saying that Aunt Bethany should, because it's her 80th Christmas, she should be the one saying grace. What is interesting about that actress, Mae Questrell, this was her final movie, but she began her career in 1930 as the voice of Betty Boop. So,
there you go.
Long story career. But they're trying to tell her it's her turn to do grace, and she's like, "What grace? She died 30 years ago." And he's like, "The blessing."
The blessing.
And then finally, she starts to give the blessing, which is, "I pledge allegiance to the flag." Everybody stands up, gives the pledge of allegiance. Clark says amen, and they go to town eating.
Yeah. I think the challenge in this movie is like, who has the better one-liners? Is it Clark or is it Eddie? Eddie, I have historically all of my life said shitter's full, you know what I mean? Because it's like from this movie. Although he actually say, that's only just a small snippet of that whole scene. But Clark kind of he steals, I think, most of the one-liners in this movie. I think he's got the best ones. And he's like, "Eddie, can I refill your eggnog, get you something to eat, drive you out in the middle of nowhere, leave you for dead?" Quick, understated, done, move on. It's perfect.
And Eddie's attire, he's wearing like a dickie that you can see through his white sweater, his off-white sweater.
This is where he's got those white shoes on too that he gave Clark in the first one. Because he was in the first one, he was like, "I know how much you liked him so much."
So my last favorite moment is very similar to my favorite moment from the first film, which is where Clark, everything's burning down around him. Everybody's ready to go. The luggage is at the door. People are ready to leave. And Clark's like, "Where do you think you're going? Nobody's leaving. Nobody's walking out on this fun, old-fashioned family Christmas. No, we're all in this together. This is a full-blown 4-alarm holiday emergency here. We're going to press on. We're going to have the happiest Christmas since Bing Crosby tap danced with Danny F and K. And when Santa squeezes his fat white ass down that chimney tonight, he's going to find the jolliest bunch of assholes this side of the nut house." Perfect crescendo.
Totally. Again, he's at every man where he's mellow, he's chill, he's trying to keep it together, and then he just explodes. And he explodes in like the only way that Chevy Chase can do it. And, I feel like I've had that moment with my family every time I get together with them. So, it's all it's relatable. It's real.
So we talked a little bit about those opening scenes where Clark's flipping off that truck in the beginning. And I think that the most interesting part about that is that the old Dodge pickup that tailgated Clark it had been previously used in Kurt Russell's work truck in the movie Overboard from 1987, and the classic Rowdy Piper movie They Live, also by the great John Carpenter. But it's always cool when you can see something show up in multiple films. They probably just have a lot of vehicles somewhere and they pull them for movies, but it's cool that it happened to be used in those two movies as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one of the scenes earlier on too, when Clark is setting up all the Christmas lights, and he's trying to get them to work, and they don't, and he freaks out. So he takes all his frustration out on the decorations, and he's punching that whole plastic Santa setup. Well, he actually broke his pinky when he punched the Santa. So he kept filming, he kept moving, and he just reverted to kicking it and clubbing it and sort of trashing it in a different way. And kept the take. And they ended up using that actually for the final scene, which not quite the same as like Leo DiCaprio and, when he cuts his finger in The Revenant, but whatever, pretty close.
The scene where Chevy Chase is reading People magazine. I actually always wondered, like, what's on the cover of that magazine? I'm always paying attention to that stuff, like when I watch movies,
Yeah.
especially pop culture things. So if there's a TV playing in the room, I'm like, oh, what's that commercial for in that TV from 1987? In this case, I was like, who's that dude with the glasses on the People magazine? Well, that was actually a picture of the director, Jeremiah Chechik.
They did something similar in the first Vacation too, when they stop at like, I think they're in a gift shop or they're in a hotel, or they're checking out or something like that. There is a travel brochure on the counter, and it has Christie Brinkley on it, who later showed up in the Ferrari. So there's always like these little Easter eggs in there too. But we talked about Eugene Levy, his ability to ad lib and improv earlier in the first movie. I don't think there was a lot of improving that was happening in these movies. Most of it was scripted, except for this one scene where when he realizes he doesn't get his bonus and he's flipping out on his boss, and he's just going off on this tirade and kind of swearing and calling him everything in there. Sort of scripted, sort of ad-libbed, but apparently all the cast that was behind the cameras all had like signs around their neck with different words, and he was like pulling them in as he was sort of like freestyle riffing it and adding different things into it. So that's kind of a cool way of making a scene, and that's a pretty long scene too, where if he's just kind of like rolling his lyrics, man, he does a really, really good job of doing it at that.
Yeah, it kind of makes me think of like the outtakes from like Will Ferrell movies where they just riff and they riff and they riff, and you see all the funny things it could have been.
Right.
I'm curious if there were outtakes of that.
And some of that stuff just like fails terribly,
Yeah.
Usually when they're good, they're like, it's like a one-liner. This is like a pretty long diatribe where he goes off for like, a couple minutes. So I would imagine that's pretty hard to do.
So in the final scenes of this movie, when Cousin Eddie brings back Clark's boss, Frank Shirley, the SWAT team breaks into their house and they all got the guns on them and stuff like that. And Ellen apologizes and says, oh, I'm sorry, something to the effect of, this is our first kidnapping,
right?
Which is false,
right?
Because in the first movie, they kidnapped the security guard at Wally World. And in the second movie, Ellen is kidnapped. So this is actually their family's third kidnapping.
Yeah, in that same scene too, like the SWAT comes in and they're like, everybody freeze, and the whole family freezes, and Ellen freezes and she's got her hand grabbing Clark's junk. Well, that whole thing was improvised. She just did that. It wasn't scripted. And then like the boss introduces her to his wife, and she shakes her hand, and then she puts her hand back on Clark's crotch. And none of that was scripted. It was all improvised by Beverly DeAngelo, and it actually made it in the cut. So those are kind of fun, cool little anecdotes that you hear about these movies that makes me always sort of fantasize what it would be like to be like an actor on a set and kind of having those kinds of fun things like that.
So before we move on, was there anything else, I guess from either movies that we wanted to talk about? Just moments, shining moments.
We what I think collectively makes these movies really, sort of iconic and memorable is the believability of them. Through which is really funny because Clark always seems to particularly like cherish his relationship with Rusty, and he has these moments where Rusty, like these man-to-man times, and then he's like, Audrey who? You know what I mean? And he like totally forgets his daughter. I mean, that's the pun there. But I think that's why these movies work, is because there's that you can believe the connection that these families are like, that these are real. These are real situations happening. The dialogue is real. The blow-ups from Clark are real. The disaster at the dinner table, like you so desperately want to have this nice moment with your family, and then the turkey, dude. We were in Thanksgiving last week, and Tiffany's father cooked the turkey in the deep fryer, and dude, I don't think it was the same, but I mean, it was overcooked. You know what I mean? It happens. You relate to that shit. And in your head, you build up these scenarios. You want the perfect vacation. You want the perfect holiday. You want these memorable moments with your family that you can sit in an attic and watch on film years later. You know what I mean? And it never goes that way, So that's why.
Well, actually, what's funny is that like in the forefront, it's not going that way.
Right.
But when you go back and you watch the movies, it actually is happening the way that it did in the movies. Like the family home videos. Like you don't remember like the really bad stuff. It's more stuff to chuckle at.
That's a memory trick. That's a human thing where you filter out all that bad shit. So that's the expression time heals. Because if you retained all that junk, you would just explode.
Yeah.
So psychologically, your mind is playing tricks on itself to filter out all that bad shit so that you only.
Well, thank you, Ken, for reminding me that life is actually dark and
I'm an amateur
dismal.
psychologist. But add that to my list of things that I'm doing in December. But I believe that's true. I believe that's true. Specifically now, I know that like I don't remember a lot of the things that my son did when he was an infant. You know what I mean? But just like the cool little moments.
Yeah.
So, but that's what this is. That's what makes these movies really like, oh shit, it hits home because we've all experienced something similar to that. And then this to be true, like when you're going through it at the time, whatever terrible moment it is, it seems like it's the worst thing. And then you get through it, or you look back on it like years later and you're like, you know what? I'm glad I experienced that insanity because I'm a better person for it. I'm more knowledgeable, but damn, I got a really good story now. You know what I mean? Remember when we cut like my mother, my mom, I was watching these movies out in the living room and my mom's here with me now. And, Clark's setting up the lights and my mom's like, remember when you set up the Christmas lights on the gutter and blew the whole string? And I was like, yeah. You put the pliers in them. I'm like, yeah. She's like, remember when the Christmas tree fell over, in high school? And she's like, I'm like, yeah. She's like, that's the last time we bought a real tree. And after that, it was a fake tree. And I was like, I know. So these things, they trigger these responses and these these memories. And
my dad and I always call them our adventures. Like the weird things, like when he helped me move and he moved my couch, but he didn't secure the cushions and the cushions are all over the freeway and he's out there trying to recover my cushions while probably my mom is yelling at him like, why didn't you secure the cushions? You're going to get run over by a car. And like, or Crystal always jokes around with me. My line is like, it's always me. Like, I'm always like, it's always me. Like, why does this happen to me? We went to set up our pre-lit Christmas tree. Last year we set up our pre-lit Christmas tree and just the top section didn't light up. Yeah. So like, okay, I guess I will buy 100 string of lights and put it on. Well, this year now 2 different sections didn't light up. So like, okay, we'll go buy the exact same lights so they match and they're all nice and we redid it. So we should be set for a while now, but like, you're like, the whole reason you buy a pre-lit tree is so that you don't have to worry about the lights.
It's purpose there, yeah.
But so let's jump back into both movies and talk a little bit about the music, because as with any films, music often make these films. Probably the most iconic for all the vacation movies is the Lindsey Buckingham song Holiday Road.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think it was in Christmas Vacation though, but that's
I think it's the only one that
they didn't leave the house, so it doesn't make sense to be in that movie. But there's just certain films that have a certain song, and I don't recall ever hearing that song anywhere else except for this movie. So it takes you there instantly when you hear it. And in fact, I've been trying to fall asleep at night right now, and I'm kind of an insomniac as it is. That song has been in my head while I'm lying in bed, and I'm trying to go to sleep. And I can't. Holiday Road. I'm like, please stop, so hopefully after this podcast's over, there's a cleanse and I'm not hearing that song any longer. But for this movie, it's pretty amazing.
I may recommend you put on the composer Angelo Badalamenti to try to fall asleep.
Okay.
Angelo Badalamenti is most well known for scoring David Lynch films. He won a Grammy for the theme to Twin Peaks.
Okay.
And he even scored one of our previous podcast movies, Dream Warriors, A Nightmare on Elm Street 3.
Uh-huh.
But oddly, he also scored Christmas Vacation.
That was a great segue, dude. That was impressive.
I don't know how that all works together, but I love the music in Christmas
I don't know
Vacation.
how Oingo Boingo becomes like the greatest, composer for soundtracks ever either, but weird shit happens,
Yeah. I mean, I often think about Blue Velvet when I think of Christmas Vacation, but
yeah, exactly.
The other, great usage of songs, though, sometimes it's just sound selection. So like the Bing Crosby, Mele Kalikimaka.
Yep.
Synonymous with the swimming pool concept in this movie and using his bonus to get there. Like, it's hard to hear that song and not think about that scene, as well as they use Gene Autry's Here Comes Santa Claus. Like, those are iconic songs for anybody from myself to my grandmother. Like, all generations associate those songs with Christmas. So when you can work them into a film, there's some sentimental value connection there.
The Christmas songs for Christmas Vacation too are like perfect for this movie, but remarkably there was no soundtrack like album for this. Like oftentimes there is,
Yeah.
I think there's actually like bootleg copies of it. Like people,
I did see that
bootlegged Christmas Vacation soundtracks, which is hysterical. Like, who would do that? But apparently there's enough.
Well, and I saw that like the bootleg version has like some John Williams music from like Home Alone or something on it. Like that wasn't even from the film, but they're like, we need to fill it out. So what can we put on here that kind of
didn't say it was a good bootleg. It just said there was a bootleg.
Did you say you're selling the bootleg? Is that what it was?
Yeah. They're available on Instagram.
Instagram.com/culpable.
Please Venmo me.
So why do these movies stand above? Let's first of all just talk about like the legacy of these movies and why these are great classics. You already kind of started getting into it. I mean, the themes of family vacation, the road trips, and then like let's segue that into like why is Christmas Vacation such a holiday classic?
Yeah.
But let's start with Vacation.
Well, I think we nailed most of it already. It's relationship, it's believability. In that movie particularly, it's realism. Like that movie is there's no Hollywood speak. I mean, the end is a little exaggerated in terms of like kidnapping, the park employee, but
for some,
I mean, realistically, could your aunt die, on a road trip and you had to make a choice? What are you going to do? Would you drop her off at your, cousin's house in the backyard? I don't know. Maybe. It's pretty funny. Like their dialogue about it is believable. And that kind of like squashes that sort of, Hollywood fake magic that happens a lot. That's why I think that Vacation, sort of stands out more than any of them, is because of its realism. It's de facto believability.
One thing that I wanted to take notes on when I was like going to watch the movie and take some notes was to see things that seemed dated to me. And surprisingly, the movie didn't seem very dated. Like it all seemed very applicable. Yeah, the cars are different years and whatever, but it didn't feel super like rewatching it now, it didn't lose anything.
It's Americana, families get in cars and drive across the country to a destination. That's their vacation. And the journey is more of the vacation than the destination is. And that's what the memory is. Like we just said, the hardships that you have en route end up being the stories that you tell. You don't tell the story about really the roller coaster ride. You tell the story about, the flat tire you got, or the time you got robbed, or the time your Aunt Edna died and you had to strap her to the roof. Those are things that, make all of the journeys that you go through, like all those little steps are the things that make it, fun and memorable. And that's why that movie is the way that it is. And it's timeless. Yeah. The movie doesn't age because you can put it in any time frame and there would still be families doing that exact same thing.
And the same thing, except this year where people are staying home.
For this year.
Christmas Vacation is equally relatable. We've all had that situation. And like I said, I watch this movie every year. Like there's certain movies that are kind of in a rotation. Like maybe I watch them every other year. But I feel like this one for sure, sometime between Thanksgiving and mid-January, I'm definitely going to catch this movie. It's funny every time. Yeah. There's things I don't notice every time. You have that anticipation, like any good comedy, where even when you know it's coming, you're anticipating that scene. Mm-hmm. And then Cousin Eddie says the line and you all die laughing and everybody has a great time, and it only gets finer with time.
So that said, which one can you rank these two? Can you say which one is a better movie, or do you have a favorite of these two?
I'm going Christmas.
Yeah, I thought you were going to say that. And I'm going to go The First Vacation.
Okay.
Yeah. If you had asked me this question last week before I rewatched these movies, I probably would have said Christmas Vacation because it was more memorable to me off the top of my head. Sure. It's funnier, it's newer. I've seen it more often, but after I watched them again, they're pretty close. It's either one could win this conversation.
Yeah.
But for me, I think just to sort of rehash what I've said already, the first one is 100% believable. Christmas Vacation is not 100% believable because of some of the silliness that's involved. But the kids have a more active role. His relationship with Rusty in particular, in the first one, sort of this father-son moments, drinking the beer out in the desert, and when Rusty catches him swimming in the pool with Christie Brinkley, and he's like, what are you doing out here, Dad? And he's like, I was ordering food. She was a swim up waitress. And he's like, you think Mom's going to buy it? You know what I mean? And he's like, good talk, Rusty. You know what I mean? It's just, to me, it feels like it's real. And I'm going to rank it a little bit higher than Christmas Vacation for those reasons. Splitting hairs, but those are the reasons.
So we got a listener question that kind of goes with my personal answer for this too. Is so what was a hilarious C.W. Griswold moment in your own lives? So I don't know if it's hilarious. It's actually kind of depressing. But my Clark Griswold moment is what I call getting Jelly of the Month clubbed, which I haven't actually been gifted the Jelly of the Month club, but it's that feeling of like at one point in my career, every year you get an annual bonus.
Yeah.
I'm young. I am depending on that money in my mind, just like kind of like Clark with the pool. Like in my mind, I've already spent that money. I haven't actually spent it because I don't have it, but I'm anticipating that and I'm very excited. And I got that annual envelope that would have had that bonus in it. Mm-hmm. And it was a Christmas letter.
Oof.
And, you check the envelope twice, 3 times because you're like, this can't be right. And by all means, like I have no problem when a company is struggling or whatever that you would like tell your employees, hey, it's been a rough year. We can't have bonuses this year. But the fact that there was no conversation and like, it's always like the week before Christmas or something. And you're like just so excited. What
was in the letter?
It was like a personal letter, like, like a holiday letter. Like, this is what we've been up to this year, blah, blah, blah.
Oh, that's awful.
Yeah. It was kind of awkward, And then you're like, is it just me? did, did anybody else like? And then you find out like, no, nobody got anything. Like it was like, but like, you know, what do you do then too? Because you don't like, you're not like going to go to your coworkers and be like, hey, did you get a bonus? Because like I didn't get one.
I would have been like my closest confidant at work. I've been like, dude, what?
Well, I think that eventually everyone kind of figured that out. But like, I think that's probably my most like Clark Griswoldy moment. What about you? Anything?
Well, I mean, I've had a lot of Clark Griswoldy moments, I think, but I certainly have had haphazard incidents installing yard decor for Christmas. I grew up on the East Coast in New Jersey, so there's a lot of snow. Winter is big. Christmas decorations in the wintertime is a big deal. And, we had this rickety old ladder, and, many times I came dangerously close to falling off the roof. Those were pre-LED days, so it was like the old screw-in light bulbs that were big, and if you threw them, they were glass and they popped. Well, if you break off the glass bulb and you can't get the little twisty metal part out of the socket, do not stick a pair of needle nose pliers into said string when it's still plugged in. Okay.
Oh,
well, actually, I don't recall if I got zapped. I probably did, but it just
Ken actually doesn't remember anything for the next 2 hours.
Out the whole string, and my mother likes to remind me of that. In fact, she just did, because I just, I put up a ton.
Here's a picture of Ken.
Yeah. I mean, I do the whole holiday decor, the Halloween decor, hardcore, but I actually broke down and I put up gutter lights just 2 days ago.
Oh, look at you.
And, it's pretty big. And now I looked at it and I'm like, well, this is just not enough. So now I got to go back to Home Depot and I got to like do the bushes and all the other shit. It's like, once you commit, man, next thing you know, you got the whole Griswold house like that.
Yep.
So, I can relate to all that shit. Yeah.
Yeah, we have a lot of like Christmas decor in the house, no exterior because we're in a complex here. Yeah. But I think before the show I was mentioning to you, like we have a spooky town, so it's like a Halloween village. Not yet gotten into the Christmas village, but like on the collectibles front, there's a very cool Christmas vacation Christmas village. So everything's themed. They got the RV, they got the house, they got all the characters. That's cool. But it was like produced in very limited production. So you have to buy, if you buy it, it's like hundreds of dollars per piece. Like it's just outrageous. But there's one thing that I could either bring back from the dead for production or, find it. It would be that. I know they've done die-cast vehicles. There's die-cast RV, the station wagons. I know we've kind of got a little off path here. Let's bring it back. So I would go Christmas because I feel like Christmas I could watch every year. I don't think I could watch the other vacation every year. That's every few years, right? Kind of a thing. But Christmas, it's more of a tradition for myself and my family watching it every year. Why? So we know that these movies are the two best movies. Why are these better than the other two main in the main four films? Why are they so much better?
Poor writing. I think it comes down to poor writing, and, European Vacation, I think it's a sophomore slump. You had a great hit coming out of the gates. How do you try to rekindle that magic right away? Maybe it tried too hard. It had its moments, but it just fell a little flat. They came back with Christmas. Great. Vegas was just not even, that plot. Was there a plot? It was terrible. It was just like Clark gambling the whole time and Ellen falling in love with, who's a singer? I'm drawing a blank.
I don't know why. Yeah, I don't know. Dunkashane.
Yeah, but either way, I think it's just storytelling when it comes down to. Those ones try to be a little bit more complex, make it, get it out of, this is a story about a family hanging out with their family. Take them out of that scenario, put them in Europe, put them in Vegas, just didn't work as well. So it's a simple, it's a simple idea. Keep it simple. Wayne,
I would.
There you go.
Yeah, Wayne Newton. I think I would probably, like Crystal was asking me which one's better, Vegas or European. I think I would I feel like they're very even. Whereas like the quality was a little bit better with Vegas, but the story was a little bit better with Europe. So
I'll probably go Europe on that one.
yeah, I think so. And then there's, obviously the reboot, which has Clark and Ellen in it as grandparents. I just felt like that movie just tried too hard. Like there were elements that were funny. Like overall, it's like a ha-ha stoner comedy kind of movie, like a Harold and Kumar kind of a thing. It has its moments, but like the youngest son, it just seemed very forced. The vulgarity, the threats of violence and stuff. Like you may have that character for a split second in a movie and it's funny, but they just kept pushing it and going to the well and going to the well. It didn't have that crescendo where you have that Clark Griswold crescendo in the successful movies. In this movie, they were just trying to crank it to 11 all the time and see what sticks. So there were elements that were okay. I like that it was like a reboot sequel versus a total reboot. Like if he would have been cast as Clark Griswold, that would have been sacrilege,
Right.
So to make him the dad Rusty, I think that was a little bit better. But and Christmas Vacation 2, Electric Boogaloo, who knows? But
yeah, I agreed on all points, man. But ultimately, I think, there, and when you have franchise movies, sometimes, the production companies know that they're beating a dead horse and they're going to put out a dud and they'll do it anyways, just because they know they can turn a sort of an easy profit on it, like, it says the name Vacations on it, so we'll sell it. I think the Vegas Vacation was the only one that was not under the National Lampoon's moniker until the last one.
Yeah, and I also think that like if somebody wanted to do a road trip movie, like just off the top of my head, there's that Ice Cube franchise. Are We There Yet?
Yeah.
Like I've never seen that movie, but like what a great idea. Call it something different.
Sure.
Rename the characters, rip it off for all means, rip it off, but just change the title. And so anything else to say about these movies before we kick into high gear here?
No, we're good, man.
Classics.
You got any other Christmas movies that are on your list aside from Vacation?
I always try to watch Home Alone.
Yeah.
There's the non-traditional Christmas movies I love. You got your Die Hard, you got Gremlins. Gremlins 1 and 2 is going to be the next podcast I do. Crystal's going to be co-hosting that with me. Love the Rankin Bass stuff, the stop animation stuff, Charlie Brown Christmas.
There's a new Christmas movie out on Amazon Prime Jacob and I are going to watch. It's called Santa Jaws. Have you seen the trailer for this? I'm serious. I'm very serious.
I have not heard about this.
It's like Sharknado, except for the shark wears a Santa hat.
Oh, boy.
Available for free, Amazon Prime. That's on queue. It's in the queue for this weekend. That'll be our next podcast.
You know what?
Like an instant holiday classic to me.
You know what? Holiday movie I like that, kind of flew under the radar for a long time is Jingle All the Way with Arnold Schwarzenegger. Oh, love that movie.
Silent Night, Deadly Night. I don't recall Jingle All the Way. Actually, I gotta.
Oh, it's good. Sinbad's in it. Sinbad's great. Young little Anakin Skywalker plays his son, Jake Lloyd.
Oh, really?
Phil Hartman's in it as the neighbor. It's a good cast, good watch.
All right.
One of those movies, just like these movies, where the more times you watch them, the better they get. So.
Right.
It's a fun time of year. It's weird because I rewatch movies all year round, and this is the time of the year that like normal people rewatch movies that they watch every year. So it's like, oh, welcome to the club. We're gonna rewatch a bunch of classics. This is great.
Yeah.
All right, you ready for our final segment?
I am, dude. Let's do it.
All right, it's time for our final segment of the podcast, a very special holiday edition of The Firing Squad.
I'm glad this has returned, by the way.
In this segment, I will be asking our guests 10 quickfire questions. Ken hasn't seen this list of questions prior to me to asking them, so his answer should be quick and simple with no explanation needed.
Okay.
I know you're glad, except these are just going to be 10 questions of name an artist and song. So you just got holiday punked.
Fine.
No, but all right, let's do it. Are you ready?
I am.
All right, number 1, favorite go-to holiday film that's not Christmas Vacation.
I don't know. We just kind of talked about them. Planes, Trains, and Automobiles is a pretty good one too.
Ooh, excellent.
Yeah.
Also, John Hughes.
Yes.
Number 2, favorite Christmas cookie.
Ooh. I don't know. Is that a thing? I mean, a lot of people crush up peppermint stuff like candy canes. I'm not really into that.
Like homemade cookies, some sorts.
Yeah. You know, I like just like the sort of like the buttery sugar cookies that just have like the mass of like the
frosting,
crystallized like sugar on top.
Oh yeah.
If you make them, I'll just house them all day, dude.
Yep. All right. Those sound great. Number 3, do you have a favorite version of A Christmas Carol?
What do you mean, like a movie?
Yeah, like the story. So Charles Dickens writes the book, and then there's
Bill Murray's Scrooged by 100%. Sure.
I had a feeling you were going to pick
question there, dude.
I would actually go with Mickey's Christmas Carol, probably as my.
All right.
But which is funny because as a kid, it felt like a 2-hour movie, and now it's like 40 minutes or something.
Yep.
Number 4, Christmas decorations before or after Thanksgiving?
After.
Couldn't agree more.
100%, no question.
Number 5, favorite Rankin Bass Christmas film.
I don't even know what that is. Don't hate me.
Rankin Bass is the stop animation. Year Without a Santa Claus, Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, Frosty the Snowman.
I think Rudolph. I like Rudolph. I think that they kind of like created the classic like round nose for Rudolph. That was a part of my Christmas card last year, actually. So I didn't realize that there was like a school for that. Not a school, but like
there's a production company that like made them all.
I didn't realize that.
The only one that wasn't stop animated was the Frosty animated one, which is also part of that company.
That's a pretty good one too. But you know, Rudolph, I think it's the one that I remember the most. So that'll be my answer.
I know I'm not answering your questions too, but I can't help myself.
No, go for it
here. But I really like the Santa Claus one, which is like it basically tells the story of Santa Claus from the time he's a baby until he's like breaking into people's houses, and it tells the story of why he puts the toys in the socks.
I'm under a rock, dude. I never saw that.
Send you a link.
All right. Looks like I got some holiday classics to watch this year.
Yeah, I've got the Rankin Bass like collection, DVD collection. So I'm a big fan though. Like Rudolph, Frosty, Santa Claus, like those are my go-tos. Star Wars Holiday Special, 1978. Mm-hmm. Have you seen it?
No.
The fabled holiday
special. Not. If I saw it, it would had to have been live as a kid, and I have no memory of it.
Yeah, it's been like wiped off the planet. I have a bootleg copy, of course. Mm-hmm. Probably only need to watch it once. It's been panned even by like the hardcore Star Wars nerds out there, right? Yeah, it's pretty bad. It has like celebrities in it, but it's like breaking out of canon, you know, like it's just really, it feels like a variety show special. Like, you know, the classics from like the 70s and 80s. Feels like one of those. Like, yeah, very odd, and I don't know. We're checking out, but so Jacob's not around, right? No, he's not. He's not going to see this for the next like 10 years, right? Right. What's the gift you are most excited to be giving Jacob this year? Oh, well, he has a birthday in September too. So I kind of
I went crazy and got him all this cool Star Wars stuff for his birthday, which I probably should have held out for Christmas, because now I'm sort of struggling to get him stuff. We've got a bunch of things that are for him, but actually there's two things I'm most excited for, which I think are kind of funny. One of them is I recently moved my mom from New Jersey. So cleaning out the house with her, I found my old metal toolbox I had as a kid.
Cool.
I'm giving that to Jacob and my uncle sent me like a little hand planer that was my grandfather's. So I'm giving him that. Cool. And he's maybe a little too young for it, but I'm going to start it off that. And I'm also getting him a little fish tank with a beta in it too.
That's cool.
Yeah. So those are kind of the two things I'm excited about. But then we got a bunch of other like cool stuff, but it's all like things that he doesn't need that he already has, So I'm excited about those two things.
Hey, 16-year-old Jacob. Yeah, I'm talking to you.
Yeah. Go give your dad a hug.
Yeah. All right. Number 8. Favorite Christmas album or artist?
Ooh. Well, I'm going to go a little obscure on this. I saw Twisted Sister do a very twisted Christmas live in Jersey in like 2006, something like that. And if you've never seen Dee Snider, speaking of Dee Snider, sing Christmas carols, it's a sight. So I believe he also has an album that they've recorded that, but live Twisted Sister singing Christmas carols, and they legitimately sing Christmas carols. He's got like the 12 metal days of Christmas or something like that. I forget. That's like the song that he wrote. You know what I'm talking about?
I listen to that album every year.
All right, I'm not fucking crazy then. All right.
It like the first song opens with the "We're Not Gonna Take It" drum beat, but it's "Come All Ye Faithful."
Right, that's what it is. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great album. I heard in an interview where he's like, "Yeah, it's a bunch of Jewish guys doing Christmas songs."
Right.
Like, it's really good. Like, I've heard many of metal covers of Christmas songs,
right?
And they're like good for like the kitsch part of it. Like, oh, that's cute. Like Rob Halford singing whatever, and Dio singing "We Wish You a Merry Christmas," which is great. But this album, front to back, solid, brother. Yeah. Like, it's a solid Christmas album. Yeah, worth checking out.
I also like Mannheim Steamroller. I don't know if you've ever heard of them.
Of course.
They do pretty rad Christmas albums. And then there's like that one that has like, it's like the rock version of like, it's like dun 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 dun. And I don't know.
Trans-Siberian Orchestra. I've seen them in concert.
I feel like Alex Skolnick is somehow connected to that, right?
I don't think because he rejoined. I think that was before he rejoined Testament.
Yeah.
Skolnick did it for a while. There's a bunch of dudes that are like currently active metal artists. There's actually 2 versions of that band now.
Yeah.
So they do an East Coast version and a West Coast version so that they can tour all the major cities like the 2 months before and after Christmas.
Dude, only you and I can turn Christmas into a metal conversation.
Yeah, Trans-Siberian is really cool. Like, they were like the new version of Mannheim Steamroller. Like, as a kid, I remember Mannheim Steamroller being like, yeah, this is...
dope. It still holds up, man. My mom played
their Carol of the Bells is the version in Home Alone when he's like setting all the traps.
Right.
And I'm like, I'm so ready to like go and set a bunch of traps because of that. But I'm a big fan of Harry Connick Jr. Christmas.
Yeah, all right.
Brian Setzer Christmas. Of course, like the Rat Pack. I love the classic Bing Crosby stuff. Like, I like the old stuff and I like some of the new stuff. It just get, like you said earlier, I don't think we were on air, but you were talking about how, like, you're setting stuff up and you start hearing the same songs over and over again. I like to mix up the flavors. So you get a little bit of Twisted Sister Christmas. You get a little bit of Brian Setzer Rockabilly Christmas. Yep. Reverend Horton Heat has a cool Rockabilly Christmas album. We Three Kings, it's called, because it's a 3-piece.
That's cool.
Pretty creative. So, all right, 2 more questions. Number 9, favorite holiday candy.
I like. Is it cherry? Or I like the candy canes that are the fruity ones.
Okay.
I think they're cherry candy canes.
All right.
You know, you get your classic peppermint, which, you know, I like to turn them into like little daggers, you know, like you always kind of eat them and make them into like toad stickers or like they'll kill you. But there's like I think it's a cherry one. There's
Sure.
another flavor that they sell. Those are good. Other than that, I do like mint M&Ms. And
All right.
I will house them all holiday season.
All right. Final question.
Yep.
This one gets a little deep.
Okay.
A favorite Christmas, and like a favorite Christmas, is that, and that might be a year, a memory, or a gift. Like, what is your most memorable Christmas?
Ooh.
Or it could be a few highlights if you've got a few things.
Well, that's a really tough one. The first thing that popped in my head actually wasn't like because it was a good thing. I remember when I was like 7 years old, I had scarlet fever, which is like a pretty serious like virus on Christmas. So I remember that. I don't know. There's a lot of I don't know. I think last year, right now, Jacob is 5. Like last year at 4, he really started to understand Christmas and enjoy Christmas and open presents and stuff. So being able to see my son run down the stairs and see all his presents and just like pile into them and shred them was a pretty awesome experience. You know, being able to kind of relive that through his eyes, remembering my memories of doing that. Because I came down the stairs, so he came down the stairs and seeing all the presents. Like that's cool stuff, man.
Touching.
You got deep, dude. You know, where else was
I know, man.
I mean, I went scarlet fever first, so.
Yeah, I don't feel like I can even give a moment now. Like,
you have a moment. What's your moment?
I don't know. It's probably early 90s. I just have a Christmas that's just memorable. I don't know why, but like it was the year I got like my wooden desk. Like I had like a bunk bed and I got the matching wooden desk that goes underneath it. But that same year was the year that the like, it was early 90s. It was when all the Toy Biz brand X-Men figures came out.
Oh, cool.
And Santa got me X-Men. My parents got me X-Men.
Nice.
My friend got me X-Men. My aunts and uncles got me X-Men. I just remember I just had like all of these X-Men figures. And that's when the problem started, Ken. So
that was the moment your collecting became a thing, huh?
That's why this wall up here is covered with X-Men still in the package.
That's why this podcast exists.
Yeah, exactly. Oh. All right, brother. That was a successful podcast.
You did not ask me the question I thought you were going to ask me in the firing squad. So I'm going to ask you. You asked me sort of a question, similar question. You said, what's your favorite album? What's your favorite Christmas song?
Ooh.
To me, this is very easy.
I'm going to say, well, there's 2 answers here. Right off the top of my head, I'm going to say Carol of the Bells because it jams.
That's a great one.
Boom. I don't know, like out of like a vocal Christmas song, I don't know what I would pick, but I do sing the like Nutcracker Ballet like pretty much year round.
Yeah.
With no reason really, but how about you?
The Little Drummer Boy.
Oh, that's good.
You know, it's like that's very, very metal, and that's like doom metal. It's like me and my drum, bum bum. You know what I mean? Like that's heavy, dude. You know, that comes in hard.
That's rocking. I actually worked with a girl, Amanda, at Hartman Design. Nate and I worked with her, and she hated the Little Drummer Boy song. She hated it.
How could you hate it?
And she hated Dwight Yoakam, just kind of random.
Okay.
So my dream was always to like get Dwight Yoakam's version of the Little Drummer Boy. But that in that time in my career, we would just mess with each other so bad. So I'd put on like the Little Drummer Boy and just play it like nonstop for 40 minutes, like as you do in a family atmosphere at a design agency.
Yep.
But yeah, that's a good song. So I already know the answer to this, but have you seen The Little Drummer Boy by Rankin Bass?
No.
That's a Rankin Bass stop animated movie.
Noted.
Just the like, even as a child, I could identify the magic of like that animation of like,
totally.
I don't know, like there's something special.
It's badass. There's just something about it too, which is really cool.
It's the same reason that when like Pixar became a thing, I like never really got that into it.
Yeah.
Because I always felt, and I guess maybe because like we work on computers and stuff, like I was like, it's just a computer, whatever. Right. You just plug it in there. Not that it doesn't take skill. I identify the art and craftsmanship and the skill it takes, but there's something about practical effects, like in movies, like action movies and horror movies, and then also just like in the, I guess, more childlike form of like Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, just that they stop animate all those little characters. Yeah. Always been a big fan of that. So Ken, are you done taking orders for Christmas?
I don't know. I haven't decided yet. I think that
where can people reach you?
Yeah. Tell them to ping me on Sculpable, my Instagram, SKULLPABLE. These are these cool NFL helmets that I'm making. I've got to decide if I'm done or not. I don't know. It really depends on how this weekend goes. I might be able to do another week's worth because then you got to ship them, and I'm shipping them ground because they're expensive to ship. So if you want them in time, if you need it for Christmas, let me know. If you can wait for after Christmas, if it's not a gift for somebody, absolutely hit me up. Hit me up now if you want the before I launch on Etsy price, because once I launch on Etsy, I'm gonna make it more legit. So
yeah, so 31, let me ask, like 31 teams are doorstops, right? And then the 32nd, which is the Packers, that's like for your mantle.
A friend of mine did ask me if he's like redoing his man cave at his house, and he was like, he actually ordered 4 of these skulls, and he said, it'd be cool if I commissioned you to do the whole league for my man cave. And I was
holy crap,
that would be badass. When you see them all together, dude, they're pretty cool, man.
Yeah, so, it does look cool when you start seeing them all next to each other with and I like that you shot them all on the same angle.
It's a branding background, brother.
Very cool. Well, it's fun to see your journey with this. I'm looking forward to seeing what your next products are.
Yeah, thanks, man. Thanks for
like you said, Sculpable on Instagram. I'll link you again on our social media for Collect and Destroy.
Awesome.
Just a reminder, this episode streamed live on YouTube. We had a bunch of people join in today, leave comments. We appreciate it. We appreciate the support. When you can join in live, the live version has got all the visuals. You can replay this though from now until forever on YouTube to see all the visuals of the show. Corresponds to what we're talking about. And then the following Monday, the audio only version hits Spotify, Apple Podcasts app, Overcast, Anchor, Pocket Casts. These are all free podcast services that you can check out our podcast for free. So we appreciate the support. Ken, thanks for being part of today's National Lampoon's Vacation, Christmas Vacation double feature episode.
Thanks for the invite, brother. I really appreciate it. It's good to see you, man.
Everyone stay safe out there. We'll catch you on our next episode when we sit down with Crystal Schmidt for another Collect and Destroy double feature episode where we'll be keeping the holiday theme rolling, this time diving into the world of Gremlins and Gremlins 2. So thank you very much.
Peace.
And good night.